Okay, they are muted down now as well. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. I hope everybody had a beautiful Thanksgiving and continues to have a beautiful Thanksgiving and starts every day with an attitude of gratitude. Every day, just recognizing how magnificent, how beautiful this thing called life is, and to recognize that we are an important part of it, an integral part of it, that life itself is expressing itself as us, through us, to one another. The divine loves you by means of me. It loves me by means of you. We are the arms, the legs, the hands, the feet. We are the instruments of the divine love right here today. And we don't always recognize that. We've been talking about this in different ways for the last month and perhaps forever, because it's the essential message. Dr. Holmes tells us that all of the problems that we face are due to our belief in separation. We are separated from our God. We are separated from ourselves. We are separated from one another. And where does this separation exist? But in our thoughts, in our consciousness, in our beliefs. Now we talk of walking the razor's edge. We talk of using the intellect to help us understand intellectually that there is a place where the intellect does not work, where the intellect cannot go. And yet we can experience, we can have the experience of this sense of being, of this sense of oneness, of this perfect love, this perfect unity, the mystical experience, the cosmic consciousness that Buck speaks of. But we have to go there. We can't just continue to talk about it, or continue to write about it, or continue to read about it. We must go there. We must have that experience. And in that place of oneness, in that experience of oneness, the ideas of separation cannot exist. They cannot exist. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. It cannot. By definition, it is the absence of light. And we might say then that the ideas of separation are the absence of unity. But the unity exists, but we are not experiencing it because we are temporarily blocked from it. Just as we experience night because we are temporarily blocked from the sun. Now, if I told you, using light and darkness as an example, if I told you that your entire experience of life was based on eyesight, and yet there was a place where the eyes could not see, you might be able to grasp that intellectually. You might be able to understand that. But if I put you in a room and closed all the doors and closed all the windows and turned out all the lights and it was perfectly dark, then you would experience it. You would still be experiencing, but you would not be experiencing the way that you were used to experiencing things. Many, many years ago, we went to Linville Caverns up in the mountains of North Carolina. And they took us down a trail. You know, we went into the cavern, and while we were there, the guide turned out the lights, the electric lights, so we could experience the total, absolute darkness like we had never experienced it before, because there was no way light could get down that far underground. You know. we had the experience of that, which was different than just thinking about it, and different than wondering about it, and different than talking about it. So the point I'm trying to make here is, it is this experience, that we are trying to accept, that we are trying to open ourselves up to. It is this very experience of the presence of the divine that is within us, that has created us out of itself. It is what the New Testament might call the Father within, the one that you meet in secret in your prayer closet. It might be the experience of the Old Testament of being still and knowing, you see. But what are all of our efforts, all of our spiritual practice, all of our studying, all of our reading, all of our listening to talks, all of these things, what they are all for is the purpose of opening ourselves up to that experience. That is what it is about. That is what we are seeking. So a couple things that I want to mention. Some of them we've been talking about. Some of them are new. But a couple things I just want to bring out today to hopefully bring home the idea that it is already here. It is already here. That which we are seeking is seeking us. Dr. Holmes tells us we are like the fish who are swimming around in the water. And they're telling one another that they heard of this great, wonderful, magnificent thing called water. And it was the source of their life. And it gave them all of their nutrients. And they wanted to find this water, and they wanted to thank this water, and they swam about from here to there to everywhere looking for the water. And they were in it. They were immersed in it. It penetrated them. You see, most of their bodies is made of water, and they did not realize that. They did not have the experience of that. Intellectually, they were blocked from it. And they were seeking that which was already there. So we have many different stories in our culture that kind of tell us that what we are looking for, we already have. Back, I think, right after the Civil War, there was a story that was written called Acres of Diamonds. And those of you who have been involved in perhaps Toastmasters or any place where you're exposed to motivational talks, probably familiar with it. People use it quite frequently. And the story was simple, and it's a story that we've heard before. This man had heard that there were these things called diamonds, and he went on a journey, and he went all around the world, and he went looking for diamonds. And everywhere he looked, he never found exactly what he was looking for. And he spent his fortune, and he spent a great deal of time searching. And he'd find little bits of diamonds here and there, but never the big, the big mother lode of diamonds that he was looking for. And finally he gave up the search, and he came back home, and he settled back down on the farm that he left. And one day he was out digging in the yard, and he struck diamonds. And of course it's a teaching story. What we are looking for, we already have. We go off on a journey, and we make the journey difficult, only to find out that we had it all along. If you've read Joseph Campbell's work on mythology, when he talks about the hero's journey, the hero feels a need to know something, feels a need to find a solution to a problem, to find something for his people or her people. And the hero goes off on this journey. And on the journey, they must face many trials and tribulations. They must meet many obstacles. This is the quest of the Knights of the Holy Grail, the Knights of the Round Table. Excuse me while I get water. And the hero eventually finds what they're looking for, and they come back home. And then they find that they really had it all along. They're right back where they started, but they're changed. See, the purpose of the journey that they went on was not to arrive to a different place, but to become different people. To become different people. And it is this experience of the presence of the divine that enables us to become different people. Some of people in traditional religion will say it is grace. It is God's grace that changes us. See? How does prayer change us? Emmett Fox says the only thing that changes consciousness is prayer. But prayer is our connection to the divine. Right? An effective prayer is one in which, while praying, we experience to some degree the presence of the divine. So all of these different techniques that we learn, all of these different practices that we learn, all of these different ideas that we entertain in our mind are all for the purpose of bringing us to a place where we can accept and receive that which already is. So a couple weeks ago I gave the example which comes from the East about the person who dropped a valuable gemstone in a pond, and they put their hand down in the pond and they were wiggling their hand around searching for the stone, and they were stirring up the mud and they were stirring up the water, and the sunlight was glistening off the ripples, and they couldn't find the stone. But what they needed to do was to stop all activity, to cease the activity. And when they ceased that activity, the water stilled, the mud settled to the bottom, and they could find that which was there. This is you and I. This is you and I trying to somehow manipulate and force and make happen this experience of the presence of the divine when it is already there. And it is not a struggle. It is not frantically moving about trying to make it happen. It is ceasing the activity of the mind, ceasing the activity of the thought that keeps us from experiencing that which is already there. Another example I thought of this morning is from the History Channel. I used to love to just sit and watch the different stories on the History Channel, and one of them was about the Second World War, and it was about a man from England who was an illusionist. He had been a stage magician, so think of like David Copperfield or somebody like that. And he was used to performing on the stage, and of course the way that his magic worked was people could look right at what he was doing, but could not see his manipulation, could not see the illusion that was taking place before their very eyes. So magicians and illusionists and people like that, they understand how to misdirect human attention. They understand how to get us to look one way when something else is going on in another. So during the Second World War, this man was assigned to a unit in the British Army, British Army, where his job was to fool the enemy, to fool the enemy so that the enemy would think one thing. And here's a couple of examples. One was Rommel was there with his tanks, and the British were there with their tanks, and they were trying to outmaneuver one another. So what the British did was the Germans knew where they were. They knew where the tanks were, and what the British did was they built decoys that looked like the silhouette of a tank that hung on the side of a truck. And they put these on trucks, and they drove the trucks away from where they were positioned. And then when the trucks got out of sight, they would take the decoy off, and they would drive back. So to the German observers looking through their binoculars, they saw tanks leaving and they saw trucks coming back, and they thought all the tanks were being moved away to a different position. And because they believed their interpretation of what they saw, they then drove their tanks right into a trap because the British tanks were still there, still guarding whatever they were guarding. They were deceived by their own thoughts. They were deceived by their own minds, the process of their mind. The illusionist gave them something to focus on. And while they were focusing on that, they did not see what was really going on. Now, another example they gave was the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was a very important shipping lane during the Second World War, and it had to be protected against aerial bombardment. Now, so normally what they do when they're trying to protect something like that, they have all these big searchlights around it that can spot the planes, and they have guns that they can shoot up and all these kind of things. And he came up with a much simpler idea. He came up with a system of mirrors that rotated, and lights would shine into the mirrors, into the rotating mirrors, and they would beam back up into the air. Now, if you've ever been out at night, for example, and somebody shines a light in your eyes, you can't see anything beyond the light. You can see the light, but you can't see anything beyond it. So if somebody's got a bright light and you're holding it in front of them, they're shining it right in your eyes, you can't see the person beyond the light. All you can see is the light. So this is what he came up with. And when they went to test it out, the British flew their own planes at night towards the canal to test it out. And when they first turned the system on, the lights had blinded the pilots so much and disoriented them so much that they lost control of the plane. They had to go on to instruments because they couldn't trust their eyes anymore. They couldn't trust what they were seeing. Now, to me, the interesting thing is the Suez Canal was still there. It was all still there, see. But the pilots from the air could not see it because they were blinded by the light. They were distracted by something that was between them and the canal. So if we think of the workings of mind, now, you know that I'm kind of a stickler for words. We use words in our language. We talk to one another and we use words, and we assume that whatever we mean with the word is what somebody else means with the word. And that's usually not the case. This is why in business we had to teach people to ask for clarification. I'm not certain what you mean by that. This is what it means to me. What does it mean to you? Oh, well, no, you have a different meaning. Okay, and let's kind of agree on a meaning, and a meaning of that word, and we can move forward. For the last couple of weeks, the Zoom group, we've been watching some videos, talking about things like sympathy, empathy, compassion, loving kindness. And if you think of all of these words, they mean something to us. But what we find when we get into it is that other people use them in different ways. And we don't necessarily understand. We don't necessarily understand what they mean. So mind and thought and consciousness are words like that. We talk about my mind or your mind. We talk about my thoughts, or I had a thought. And we really, excuse me, from the point of view of understanding, we really don't have a common agreement on what that means. So now you can look, there are actually scholars who are philosophers of consciousness, and they are trying to understand what is consciousness. What is it? We all believe we experience it. We all believe we experience it the same way, and maybe we do or maybe we don't. But what is consciousness, you see? In our Western world, we have spent 1,000 years or so looking out, weighing things, measuring things, touching things, feeling things, and kind of our whole experience is focused out there. And we haven't stopped to look at, well, what is it that's looking at that, you see? What is it that is observing? Who is the observer? Where is the witness? So we have this phenomenon that we call thought. Right? Thoughts occur. Where do they occur? We think, well, they occur within my mind, but well, what is my mind? You know, did my brain create the thought, or did the thought come through the brain? All of these different things that we can't answer, we don't know. And as I've said, it kind of depends on your orientation towards life. If you're a materialist, you say, well, matter creates consciousness. Chemicals of the earth formed together, eventually they created a brain, and the brain created consciousness. And then the kind of the spiritual side of that is no, consciousness created the brain. Consciousness works through the brain. If you follow me on Facebook, I posted something a week or so ago that these scientists working with lab rats that ran the maze and do experiments and those sorts of things, they discovered they wanted to go and look at the brains of the animals with X-rays or MRIs or something like that, see if certain parts of the brain were firing off. And they found this one rat that didn't have a brain. Its brain had been destroyed by some type of a disease, and it just had little remnants, little brain remnants there. And yet it still functioned. In fact, they didn't know there was anything wrong with it until they discovered it on the X-rays or the MRI. And then they went and they did all kinds of tests, and they found out that this animal functioned just as well in the tests as all of the other animals, except that it appeared to be more anxious. It appeared to suffer from more anxiety. So if you would say, well, it's the brain that causes the consciousness and the awareness, then the theory would be, well, then this animal should not have been able to do what it should do. Somehow, whatever was left of that brain had been rewired. In the videos that we were watching the last couple of weeks called neuroplasticity. The brain changes. The brain can actually change. And experienced meditators can actually change their brains so that the part of the brain that the scientists look at that lights up when we are experiencing, for example, peaceful feelings, that through meditation, that part of the brain becomes more active. Right? Our intention, if you think of it this way, our intention then caused the brain to change. So if the brain is the cause of the thoughts, then the brain is changing itself, or the intention comes from someplace else. So my point is, we don't know. You see, we don't know, but we use these terms and we use these words. So we have this experience, as human beings, we have this experience of thought, which we might call mind, or we might say that thoughts are the process of the mind. Right? But we have this constant chatter, or at least I do. I have this constant chatter going back and forth. And to me, it's like the mirrors and the lights. All of this is going on, and it is a distraction, you see. And there's something more important behind that distraction. Now, we've used the example in the past that we get from Buddhism of the monkey that awakens inside a locked house. And if you search for this on the internet, you will find many different Buddhist teachers who have written essays on this. Right? But the idea is that this monkey was out in the jungle, lived free, swinging from tree to tree, eating whenever it was hungry, and those sorts of things. And somehow it loses consciousness. And when it awakens, it is inside a house. And all the doors and windows are locked. It cannot get outside the house. So at first it runs from window to window, and the windows represent the five senses of our bodies. And at first the monkey runs from window to window, and it looks out and it's trying to figure out how can it escape, how can it get outside of this house. It can look out into the jungle and see the other monkeys. It can see the trees where it used to swing. It knows that there's something there, you see. But after time, it gives up trying to get out. It gives up trying to escape. Maybe then it occupies itself with the physical house itself. It explores the doors, it explores the windows, it explores the texture of the floors, all of these things. It distracts itself. It distracts itself from trying to escape. So the idea there is that we as human beings, excuse me while I get some water. We as human beings are trapped inside the mind, or the process of the mind, or the activity of the thoughts, however you want to think of it. There's all of these different things that are constantly flooding across our screen of awareness, like the light bouncing off the mirrors in front of the Suez Canal. There's all of these different things that are keeping us from seeing behind that distraction, from seeing what is really there. And I was reading this morning in one of Osho's book. He says, if you look at the difference between the Western and the Eastern philosophy, the point of view, the Eastern philosophy is, don't make the house more comfortable. See? Don't try to put better furniture in the house. Don't try to add air conditioning to the house that the monkey's trapped in. But find a way out. Find a way past it, because the house is not the reality. In the West, we try to fix the house up. So in the West, we kind of look at the mind and say, well, there's normal minds and there's abnormal minds, and through different treatments we can take abnormal minds and we can make them more normal. And by that definition, then the genius is abnormal, right? Does the genius need to be fixed? Well, no, we can use the work of the genius, so they have benefits. So we'll let them be abnormal because it benefits us. And what Osho is saying is, we stay trapped in the illusion. We stay trapped on this side of the illusion. And what we want to do is we want to get beyond that. See, we want to transcend that. We don't want to fix it. We don't want to analyze it. We don't want to know, in terrible detail a whole lot about it, because it is a temporary thing. It is a necessary thing for evolution to get us as far as we have come. We talked about this a week or so ago. But it is something to be transcended. Excuse me again. It is something that we must transcend. I mentioned in the email last night, I'm pretty sure it was Robert Thurman in one of his programs that he did on the essence of Buddhism. And the example that was given was, and they were making it kind of contemporary, so that for those of us living today, suppose you were in San Francisco before the bridges were built and before the ferry boats and all those kind of things. But suppose you were in San Francisco and you looked across the bay to Oakland, and you knew there was something there in Oakland. You knew there was something there that you wanted to experience, that you wanted to have. How would you get there? And he says, well, you might go chop some trees down and get some vines and lash them all together, and you might build yourself a raft. You might study about raft building. You might talk to people about raft building. Today you would go to YouTube and you would find a video, and there's somebody doing primitive technology would tell you all about building rafts. But there would come a time where you had to actually build that raft. Reading about it, studying about it, talking about it has to come to an end. You have to build that raft. And then you build a raft, and now you've got to paddle that raft across the bay, Or maybe you get fancy and put a sail on it if the wind's blowing the right way. So you might have even studied about paddling or sailing. But there comes a time to stop studying and start sailing and start paddling. So now you get yourself across the bay and you get all the way to the other side. And once you get there, what do you do with the raft? See? Do you pick the raft up and put it on your back and carry it all around and tell everybody, hey, look at my raft. Look at this. I built this. I did this. This is my raft. The raft is of no use any longer. It has accomplished its purpose. It got you across the bay. But there's more to it, because in the spiritual journey, it's not just a physical journey of getting across a physical gap. It is a spiritual journey, right? It is a spiritual journey which is that bridge from our spiritual nature to our human nature that Ralph Waldo Trine talked about a few weeks ago. Once we arrive, we realize that we are right back where we started. Once we arrive in the spiritual experience, we realize that there never was a gap, that the gap was only an illusion of the mind. Right? Like the people looking at the cardboard or the decoy cutouts of the tanks and thinking they saw tanks. We look and we think we see a gap, where in reality there can be no gap. There can be none. Our hearts would not beat if the intelligence that created the universe was not here with them, beating them for us. Because you and I don't know how to do that, you know. It is already here. It is nearer than our hands and feet. It is closer than our breath. So the question now becomes one of, how do I stop all of this activity of the monkey mind? Matthew Ricard, the gentleman we're watching the videos of, he says the blah, blah, blah neurons in your mind, the blah, blah, blah neurons in your mind. There's all this stuff firing off. Your mind is doing this. Your mind is doing that. Your thoughts are doing this. Your thoughts are doing that. Whatever mind and thoughts are. And there's this constant chatter and there's constant activity. The monkey mind, the grasshopper mind that we talk about. You know, remember Kung Fu? They call them little grasshopper? Because grasshoppers flit from here to here to here to here to here. But the trained masters were able to move past that. So meditation, we talked about, is key, right? Meditation is key. You have to have a meditation practice of some sort, and you have to not just read about it, and not just listen to talks about it. Don't watch videos about it. You have to sit down and do it. You have to sit down and do it. We have to learn to no longer be distracted by our thoughts, no longer be entangled with our thoughts, no longer engage our thoughts, but to observe them, And this is key. If I am observing my thoughts, am I the thought? Am I the one thinking the thought? Or am I the observer of the thought? Am I the witness? So what we want to do is we want to become the witness of all of this nonsense that's going on in our mind that is distracting us from seeing and experiencing that which is beyond, right? And as I say, it is an experience because the intellect can't go there. The intellect cannot understand it or explain it. No more than the eyes can explain pure darkness. It is an experience that we have to have. And fortunately, we have little glimpses of this experience that we want to nurture. And it's called love. It's called love. Love is not an intellectual exercise. It can be. I mean, remember we talked about love being a transaction and all of those kinds of things. But we talk about falling in love because we're coming out of the head into the heart. The intellect doesn't work, okay? The intellect has no place when we are deeply in love. In fact, if you think about language, you know, if you've ever been blessed with an infant in your life, you know, they don't understand your words, they don't understand your language. But if you've ever been so blessed to just be in a rocking chair and put a little one up on your shoulder and pat their back, you know, and what do? We talk nonsense talk, you know. We talk baby talk. We make goo-goo sounds and we do all of these things because language does not work, see? But love does. We experience the oneness. We experience the unity. We experience this beautiful, precious little being that is right here with us, laying on our shoulders, you see. And we experience that oneness that does not require thought, that oneness that goes beyond thought, the unity. And later in life, when we grow up and we start to fall into love, again, language fails us. So lovers speak to each other in soft tones, in baby talk tones, in nonsense tones, because the expression of love is beyond language. I read something so beautiful last night. I was reading some Rumi, and he was writing a poem about love, and he talked about his great friend Shams. And if you read Rumi, you know he has this deep friendship with Shams. And he says, "I will not write about my love for Shams, because language cannot touch that kind of love. Language cannot touch that kind of love." How beautiful. A love where language fails us. It can only be experienced, you see. Now, that doesn't stop poets from trying to write about it. And in fact, poetry, I think, does something that prose can't do. I think poetry engages the feeling more directly than prose does. We read the poem, we read Rumi's words that say, "Beyond the ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there's a field and I'll meet you there." And it does something to us. We listen to music. Now this is interesting to me. How does music work? We hear music and we feel an emotion. How does that work? Is it just a memory? Do we just remember, well, that's the way I felt the first time I heard this song? Or there is more to it? What is the connection between music and emotions? So the arts, you see, the paintings and the poetry and the movement of dance, you know, and music and all of these creative things seem to be more connected to the experience of the love. Now there are people who will ruin anything by overanalyzing it, you know, and sometimes we do that with music and with dance, and I you know, dance to me is supposed to be spontaneous movement. It's the groove, right? What's your groove? It's the way that you move. It's the way that the music moves you. And yet now we come up with, well, your heel needs to be this far off the floor and your toe needs to point this way, and we're going to judge it, and we're going to, you know, and I just laugh. I just laugh, you know. I don't think it's supposed to be judged and formulated. It's supposed to be a freedom of movement. And this is what we're talking about, is freedom of your soul. Freedom of your soul. So we all have these experiences of deep love. And I'm not talking about transactional love where, you know, where people kind of exchange company to keep from being lonely or for security or for any of those things. I'm talking about being just completely, madly crazy in love for no reason. Whether that be with our pets, whether that be with our beloved, whether that be with the child that we're holding in the rocking chair. What is it that you're doing when you are completely stopped in your thought, right? Stopped in your tracks and just experience the love. And by love, I mean the experience of unity. I am so at one with this person, with this creature, this animal, with life, with the beauty of the sunrise, with the majesty of the sunset. I am so into that experience of oneness, this pure, perfect love that wants nothing from another. just want to be. I just want to be. You see? What is it in your life? When are those times in your life that you can resonate with what I'm talking about? When you can feel that complete unity, that complete oneness? Go there. Go there. In a moment. In a moment. See, the intellect gets a hold of this and says, well, I can't do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Forget about 24/7. Do it now. Do it right now. Do it in this moment. Because in that moment where we deeply experience this unconditional love that I'm talking about, this agape love that I'm talking about, in that moment time stops. There is no time. We are in the eternal at that moment. Joseph Campbell tells us there's a difference between the eternal and eternity. Eternity means it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on, kind of like the movie Groundhog Day. But the eternal, see, the eternal is the absence of time. It is the timelessness. The timelessness. And when we are into our feeling nature, deeply feeling, see, the intellect turns off when we are deeply feeling. The intellect doesn't work. This is why language doesn't work when we are so deeply in love. We can experience the presence of another. We can experience the presence of unity. But language cannot describe it. This is why the mystics have such a hard time explaining the mystical experience. They shouldn't even try. Shouldn't even try. It just is. You see, it just is. The best I can think of is to say that it's ineffable. It's ineffable, which means words can't describe it. Go beyond words. Go beyond ideas. Move beyond the distractions of the mind, the chatter of the monkey mind that keeps us from experiencing the presence that is already there, the gem that is within, that is waiting for us to discover it, you see. Just waiting. Perfect poise. Waiting in sweet repose for us to discover that it has been there all along. See, this journey that we talk about, this spiritual journey, there's no place to go because we are already there. We already have everything we need. We just need to accept it, and we need to experience it, and we need to feel it. And one of the quickest ways to do that is with love. Find your love today. Find where you have that experience where the sense of self is completely gone. And there's just a sense of being. Let love be the way. Let love be the guide. Let go of everything you've ever learned. Let go of your raft. Let go of everything you've ever studied. And focus on love. Enter into the deep, penetrating love. And that experience of the presence of the divine as love, as perfect love, as unconditional love, that experience will change you. That is what changes consciousness. That is what it's all about. Take some time this week. Take some time today. Go sit in your favorite spot in nature. Take your favorite pet with you. Take your favorite person with you. Be without words. Gaze deeply into each other's soul, until you sense there is no difference between the two. There's no separation between the two. There is only God, and so it is.